And I think what makes a good leader is not that every decision that they make is right, but that they're able to adjust and continually make decisions that are moving us in the right direction. It's clear if somebody's making wrong decisions and the direction we're never going there, but having to make multiple decisions about the same thing is actually what a leader does, not make one decision that everything works perfect. Welcome to another episode of the H3X Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Miller, with my co-host, Mark Gearing, and we are hanging out talking about the head, heart, and hands of the multiplying church and her leaders. Today, we're going to jump into decisions. They seem to be some of the hardest things that we do, mostly because they can be wrong. And oftentimes our decisions are wrong. And we always have a shoulda, coulda, woulda mark that always lands after we make a decision. Occasionally we get them right, and occasionally we get them wrong. But the real question is, how do we, I think, as leaders, talk about and move forward with decisions when we have no idea exactly what the future holds? We can look at patterns, we can look at directions, we can look at scripture, we can have expectations, but at the end of the day, we don't know exactly what the future holds, and yet we still have to make decisions.
Right.
So how are those made, and how should we look at that fear of what if I'm wrong? What do you think?
Right. Well, I mean, as we start this conversation, there's a lot of ways you could talk about a definition of what even is a leader at the basic. But people talk about leadership as influence, and that is what leadership is. But, you and I have talked about this in a past podcast and also offline, but it wouldn't be leadership if there wasn't some ambiguity. That's kind of the whole point of the fact that you need a leader, because you need decisions to be made. And so when we're talking about this idea of decision making, really that's kind of at the core of the job, right? That is the job of being a leader. And I like how we talked about at one point this idea that when you're a leader, you don't get a 10 out of 10 certainty in your decision making. Usually you'll get maybe a 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10. If you're lucky,
and those
maybe
sometimes are a great day.
And those are a great day. If you're lucky, you might get an 8 out of 10 on some occasions. Like, dude, that's an easy win. But very rarely are you going to get a 10 out of 10 or 9 out. So usually you've got to make those decisions without having full information. And then also, to your point, people are involved. And so even when you've got a higher confidence, you're leading people. And that means that things can change even as you're doing it. And so just the lay of the land of what it means to make a decision, that is the job, is to make decisions without full certainty. That is what it means to be a leader.
Because direction and hesitancy about what we should do next or where we should go is the reason that, like you said, leadership exists, and the ways in which we create momentum, the ways in which we create direction, the ways in which we create resolve, which I think is probably one of the most key factors of making good decisions on a repetitive basis, is that it begins to develop resolve, because we know that at the end of the day, decisions will never be perfect. They're never going to be perfect, because if you say, hey, we got an 8 out of 10 decision, you still got a 20% chance, using our hypothetical, that you're going to get it wrong.
Right.
And so I would like for us to pause for a second and say, what is the expectation for the decision? Do we look at decisions as they're supposed to, when I make a decision, they're supposed to mean that I don't have to make any more, that a good decision leads to no decisions? Or do I understand that a decision is going to lead to another decision, and I should expect that?
Well, I like that you brought in that word resolve, because that actually is the key ingredient, right? It's like setting ourselves towards an outcome, a hopeful outcome that we're trying to lead other people to. And the resolve says, I'm going to make a decision because based on this information that I've got, this is the direction we need to go. Knowing that it's probably going to, as you actually begin to put things into motion, unexpected things are going to come up. The plan's going to fall apart in some way. It always does. It's never perfect. And it's going to require more decisions, but that resolve is what's going to push you through that challenge.
Well, I think too that when we make a decision, we're making a decision based upon the facts or the situation or the circumstances, or at least, and this is really important to understand too, our best knowledge of the facts, the situation, and the circumstances, because we're not
Right.
ever going to be able to hold all of them.
Yeah.
But that's assuming if we do understand, have a really good handle on the ground of what are the facts, what is the situation, what needs to
Yeah.
be done. When I make a decision, I'm making it based upon those circumstances, those facts, that
Right.
situation. But I can't control what other people do.
Yeah.
And so when I make that decision, if I have a change in somebody else's behavior, somebody else's decisions, maybe another situation or circumstance based upon what somebody else does, and it alters the situation that the decision was made, well, then that's going to necessitate another decision. And I think a lot of times that when we make decisions, we're afraid that they're going to be wrong because we think somehow it says that we were wrong.
Yeah.
And there's only so much you can anticipate. And I think what makes a good leader is not that every decision that they make is right, but that they're able to adjust and continually make decisions that are moving us in the right direction. It's clear if somebody's making wrong decisions and the direction we're never going there, but having to make multiple decisions about the same thing is actually what a leader does, not make one decision that everything works perfect.
And what it comes down to, Dave, and I'd love to share this recent example I was sharing with you before we hit record, but what it comes down to for me is the definition of success even. And I think as I'm getting, my boys are starting to move towards school age, and we're starting to really focus on some new skills for them more and more, like trying to help them become more capable and have some chores around the house at 4 years old and starting to help them develop a little bit. My definition of success has to be them accomplishing the goal. So we do want them to help like clean up a little bit, help clear the table. And that does mean getting the dishes in the right spot, but it also means growth. And so I'm a really big fan of the idea of growth mindset, where it can't just be about a fixed mindset with like either, oh, you're a good kid or you're a bad kid, but you're a growing, learning kid is
right.
What I want to celebrate with my kids. Of wow, you did that better than you did yesterday. I want to celebrate the growth process. And so I think a lot of us, I can say myself included, when we talk about this topic of decisions will never be perfect, it can be symptoms of growing up in a fixed mindset culture, maybe in our household or in school, where you either get the A or you don't on the grade card, or you make the touchdown or you don't, or whatever context you want to talk about, where it's like you are this thing. There's no room to celebrate the process and the growth. And so I think that's part of it is how do we develop leaders where their decision making is guided by a success as not just the outcome, but also the process. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that before I share my example?
Well, you know me, I took a great big personality test whenever we first started with the franchise with our business, and they wanted us all to have a good profile, right, as part of our process of getting accepted or not accepted. And I took this massive one. I don't know, it was like 68 traits or something that it measured. And number one for me was conviction. That was my number one character trait, was conviction. Drives everything I do. My last of all of them was competition. Like competition was the very end. And I got asked the question. They were like, I don't think we've ever seen a profile like this. What makes you think you're going to be good at business if you're not competitive? And I wouldn't have been able to articulate it then the way I'd articulate it now, but I don't think that the primary core driving piece of a leader should be competition, because competition is about winning personally. And the winner, like the drive of a leader is that everybody else gets to win. What you're saying is that our job is not to make a decision so we can be put on the pedestal as the one who made the right decision and get the credit.
Right.
If that's your role as a leader, you're not trying to lead people, you're trying to get famous. The role of a leader is to develop, grow, and serve a group of people or whoever is following with you so that they can be successful and win at what we're trying to do together. And so what that means is I have to have a growth mindset with those people, because my goal is not to be seen as the great one. My goal is to make sure everybody around me is gaining.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Well, I'll share what came to my mind as I was processing through this topic was a personal example. And then also there's a biblical example that was helping me guide my thought process as well. But we had a harvest push this last weekend, and we're really trying to lean into the core piece of our vision cast here is super relevant to this topic today. It's about developing leaders. We've got to, if we're going to accomplish the vision that God's given us and seeing New York reach, it's going to require a whole lot of leaders and disciples and churches, but especially leaders. And so as we did this harvest push, one of the goals was to help a guy step into more responsibility and leadership role in his neighborhood and in reaching a particular segment here. And so won't get into too many details, but we had several components to an event that we were doing, and it just didn't go well, to be honest with you. Just bottom line, it just did not go well. And I owned and apologized to him some ways that was on me for there's some things I didn't communicate well, and I just communicated ownership of what where I dropped the ball. But what came out in the conversation was it was clear that I had not done a good job on the front end of communicating what I thought of as success for this harvest push event. And for me, it was, let's just go try this and let's learn through it. And we're praying also that it leads to a foothold and some traction in this particular neighborhood and in this segment. But a piece of it is just like, we've never done this before. I'd like to see this happen again. Let's learn through this. But what came out on the other side of the debrief time was clear to me. I had not done a good job. It was a learning curve for me of vision casting, what success looked like that empowered the decision-making for this guy. And so there was honestly some defensiveness and some different pieces that were coming out that I realized was connected to only defining success as the outcome of this went really well and all these people came and everybody wants to come back and we saw these amazing results in the harvest and and we did see a guy come to faith, so praise God for that piece. But definitely it was clunky, and I would say that if he was here I think he would agree. It was clunky, but what I came away with was just realizing that decision-making piece. I was excited, actually, even through the challenges of it and through the clunkiness and like it not going well in lots of ways. I saw his ownership and decision-making grow in the midst of it. And so the decisions that were made to do certain parts of it that fell through, we had to decide in the moment, how are we going to adjust? And he stepped up along with, we supported and helped with that as well. But he stepped up and said, well, let's share the gospel. Let's just get out and share with people. And that was the right move. And we did. And so I think that key statement that you made, Dave, of decisions will never be perfect, we can't control people, is right. And focusing on, if it had been focused on things just being perfect, he would not have developed the way that he did through that. And so yeah, I celebrate his growth in decision making, and then try to do that during that debrief time of saying, hey, I apologize for these things. I own the things I did wrong, where I dropped the ball. But I want to celebrate, and I highlighted the way that I saw him grow in his decision making and the learning through it.
And that experience is going to be invaluable, because that's how you learn to not make certain mistakes over and over again. Because at the end of the day, too, we're also saying we don't want people to make the same repetitive mistakes, that they should learn to be able to forecast, to see, and to understand about situations and facts and make better decisions in the future. That experience all piles into understanding, okay, we can avoid this next time by doing these certain things. But at the same time, there's also going to be another pitfall that we didn't know the next time that's going to come up. And so I would really want to highlight this point about this decision-making, and why that scenario of things that didn't go right and then new decisions having to be made in the moment is super helpful. if you had not have already put that plan together to gather a group of people in that public space to
Right.
try to share the gospel with them, then whenever it didn't work, the decision could then easily be made. The ultimate goal was, we want to share the gospel with these people. And so he
Right.
was able, because of the circumstances that he had already initiated, to then turn around and go, this isn't going the way that we want, but what are we
Yes.
after? Let's go share the gospel with these people, which
That's
is
right.
huge, because that means he saw and understood what we were really after. And he was able to interpret that and then go after what really mattered, instead of being bothered by the minor stuff that could have caused him to shut down because he was so mad about the stuff that didn't matter. Right.
Yeah,
So I put it this way: we have to expect thorns and thistles. There's going to be sweat. There's going to be blood. There's going to be tears. It is the way in which our world works. And so I say half tongue in cheek that work doesn't work on this side of the fall. Like, we work and it doesn't work. There's thorns, there's thistles, there's problems. So if there's a way in which we can begin to shift our mindset as leaders and as we develop leaders to teach the concept of decision making is not about moving a people away from thorns and thistles. It's not about making a decision that's going to make things easier. It's about understanding that the obstacles that we come in contact with are the path.
Right.
That every decision that we make is going to lead to another obstacle that's going to require another decision, that will lead to another obstacle that will require another decision. And this pattern of obstacle, decision, learning, right? What you just talked about. We gather the facts, we make a decision, or we gather the facts, we get an obstacle, we make a decision, we debrief, we understand, we learn, we do it all over again is what builds resolve. And I think part of the reason why teams have a difficulty with resolve, especially when it comes to church leadership, is because we don't want obstacles after we make decisions. We think the work of decision making should then get rid of all the blood, sweat, and tears. And it doesn't. It just leads to the next set of them. And if we understand that and we inspect that, then we can create a culture that says, this is what a leader does. This is my role.
Yeah. Yeah. I was, as I was reflecting on where I think I dropped the ball in this weekend, and where I got to own that because I wanted to preserve some of my leadership capital with those that we were leading, and then also like lead by example in that, and that did lead to that. But it led me to some biblical thoughts, biblical examples, and the main one that came up in my mind was the circumcision issue, and then how Peter and Paul, they have this clash, and then Acts 15, and they come together for the Jerusalem Council. Well, there's a whole lot of questions around how to make those decisions of who gets to decide whether we should move forward with circumcising, or at where does that authority rest? Is it at the local church level? Is this a core issue for the whole movement? All those things. Well, that got worked out by them not letting that obstacle of that clash that happened at Antioch cause division or cause breakdown, or them trying to avoid even making the decision. It led to them bringing that to Jerusalem and working it out, such that, as I was then reflecting on it, now Paul, he later writes in the book of Ephesians that God made one out of the two, out of the Gentiles and the Jews, and brought them together. So this issue gets resolved in such a way that he's making one family out of the two, and it brings clarity for the church, not only around that issue, but around how they're going to solve problems and issues in the future around the word through the Spirit. That became a precedent. But I guess that to your point today, it's like that, them making those decisions and pressing through the obstacle led to greater clarity, and led to a framework for the church to now have out of that, that they wouldn't have had to press through.
And not only greater clarity about what to do with the Gentiles that were flooding into the family of God, but it also developed a relationship between those leaders that developed a bond of trust that allowed them to then move at a faster pace and a stronger, more connected pace in the future, so that when other issues came up, the blow up wasn't going to be as big because they had developed a trust. They could come together, they could talk about it and actually make decision making faster, which allowed them to tackle obstacles even better because of that relationship. And I will tell you this, good decisions are not always the decisions that end up being right, but they're the ones that are handled relationally well.
Yeah.
And they're also the ones that are going to admit fault when necessary. And they're the ones that are going to diversify credit. They're going to spread out credit when there's a win.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as long as you have, I think, those ideas inside of a decision, a leader is going to develop a group of people around him that are going to develop trust, not just in the leader, but between one another. Because I'll say, as a business owner, from my perspective, my team, the business is on their backs. My job is to serve my team so that my team can run this business. And I have to trust them. Even now when we're podcasting, I've got 6 employees who are closing up my shops. And there are so many things right now that I am completely trusting them to take care of and do. Right. And if I don't have a trusting relationship with them, then I have a hard time as a leader being able to move the whole group forward. And I would say that means that we should embrace the obstacles, that one of the primary decisions we make 100%. As leaders is not to passively move away from them, but to engage obstacles relationally and also in the harvest together to build trust and to actually break barriers.
Well, and I want to bring in one last piece here, Dave. I think when we moved to New York, one of the concepts that God brought to mind for Meg and I about what does it look like to plant churches and to engage in New York City. He brought to mind this book by a guy named Nassim Taleb called Anti-Fragile. And the concept of the book, I think we've maybe talked about this before, but the concept is, you can have fragile that breaks easily. If you have like a UPS package and it's not well wrapped, it's fragile, it's going to break easily, right? And then you can have something that's robust and it's really strong at the other end of that spectrum, that would seem to be, maybe that's the opposite of that. But then he actually puts in this idea of like, no, the opposite of fragile is not robust. It's actually what's called anti-fragile, meaning that the more stress it experiences, the stronger it becomes. And through the stress that's applied, it actually wants that because it actually makes it stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And so there's this element to what you're talking about that I think we need to embrace being an anti-fragile church, because we could try to avoid the thorns, the thistles, the sweat, the blood, the tears. But the point I'm taking away from what you're saying, both with your team locally, and then also what we see there from Acts 15, the trust that was built, is they became a more anti-fragile movement leadership team through what happened in Acts 15. On the other side of that, like you said, there's the trust that was built that translates to more anti-fragility of like, hey, come at us, like bring another challenge or another issue, because we now have some trust built through going through, here's the point, through going through the process of dealing with those decisions and the uncertainty. That's the process that preps you for more uncertainty and more decision making. And
to go back to your point from Anti-Fragile, I loved whenever he uses the illustration of the marathoner's bones, where he talked about the fact that the bone density and the strength of the leg bones of a marathoner are outrageously strong because running over and over and over consistently causes small little cracks and damage. And then when the body repairs those, it repairs them actually stronger than they were before. And so, that robust idea is like, I talk about plastic cups, you give those to toddlers, but enough of a beating and that cup's going to break. But we're talking about the obstacle is actually making you stronger than if you didn't go through the obstacle at all. And I think if we play it safe, we may come out thinking that we are ahead. But what we don't understand is that we're really creating fragility. We're causing the body and the leadership structures and the resolve of the church and of the disciples to actually be weakened by not going headlong into. Now, it doesn't mean we just wildly run off without any thinking. No, we're talking about strategic learning, decision making, seeking after the word, listening to the Holy Spirit, but knowing that obstacles are the path, and blood, sweat, and tears does not mean you're going the wrong direction. It just simply means it's life. And so I think, Mark, what we really want to get out to everybody as we do this podcast is that here's the deal. Stop hesitating with your decision making. Make the best decision you know how. But stop hesitating because of obstacles, because the obstacles are the path. They're the reason that leadership exists. And so we're like, go get them, like, go do this thing. Right?
It's almost like you literally can't go wrong, because by taking action, and you're going to grow, and you're going to become better at decision making.
And in your failures, you're going to learn. And in that learning, you're going to become stronger. The next decision will be better. And the strength and the bonds of the team and of the leader and of the church will be stronger, having gone through that together. And I think that the enemy will have a harder and harder time as we begin to develop, we'll use the term, that anti-fragility as a body, because we are taking on hell with a water pistol.
Thanks for listening, for watching. If this content has been helpful for you, please take a minute to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps us to get this content out there farther, to serve Jesus, grow his kingdom, and accomplish the Great Commission until there is no place left. Much love to you guys. See you next time.